For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss unfinished business and legacies of the #Zuma period. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Some people may evaluate Zuma's legacies by considering the impacts on the economy. One might look at the rule of law, public institutions, and similar factors. What do you think would be a better way to evaluate his legacies?
Well, I think all of these factors are relevant. I'm not saying that what I focused on is the only thing or the most important thing, because the economy is in a very bad way, and it relates to downgrading of credit ratings, withdrawal of investment, and these things have not happened just out of the whim of the market, but it's had to do with instability in government, bloated civil service, lack of policy development and policy implementation, a range of things like that. Also, I think the rule of law, the fact that people don't have confidence in the prosecuting system and the policing system is also a factor. So there are a number of these things, but what I try to focus on is, on the one hand, the question of what charge Zuma could face apart from the 783 counts from 2009. And my argument is that state capture is not, as far as I'm aware, a crime in South Africa, and it's not the same as corruption. And my argument is it would fit within the definition of treason if he were to be charged and he were to be found guilty. The second thing that I thought was neglected in the reasons given for removing Zuma, although the most important reason for the ANC, I think, is that they don't want to lose elections, but they don't. The thing that I referred to, the question of the cultural impact of Zuma, I think is something that we can't neglect.
Why do you also say that the notion of corruption is insufficient to cover what is entailed in the state capture?
Well, you see, corruption is usually related to one individual stealing or defrauding or entering into a dishonest relationship with another individual in order to benefit from the state, or to steal from the state or from a business. It needn't be a state-related question. Now, state capture is a much more elaborate system, as one can see from that study of the academics, as well as the SACC and other studies. It is a case where the decisions that ought to be taken by the state are actually taken or influenced to so great an extent by outside parties, in this case the Guptas and their associates, that state power is compromised, it is displaced, and the decisions that are supposed to be made by a minister or the president himself are in fact made by the Guptas, or the composition of boards, the awarding of tenders is in fact not made by the authorities who have been designated to make those decisions. Now, where you undermine and hollow out the powers of a sovereign state, to me that fits within the definition of treason, and it's not simply corruption. It is compromising the sovereignty and the functioning of the state in South Africa.
Some people could argue that our country has always been battling with violence. So is it fair to say that under former President Jacob Zuma's era, violence has been escalating?
Now, violence is part of the history of South Africa. South Africa was created through violent dispossession of the black people of South Africa, seizure of lands. Sometimes they tricked people, but usually it was through violence. In any case, the state of apartheid was maintained through violence. And the resistance to apartheid, while it was often peaceful, ultimately became violent as well, or armed struggle. And this has created an ethos in the society at large, where when people want to solve a problem, they think that reasoning is not the best way of doing it. They rather give someone a clap or some such thing, or find ways of dealing with the question where mainly male aggression is used. Now, where the Zuma period is distinct is that from the very beginning it was associated with masculine violence, as in the rape of Fezeka Kuzwayo, the representations around the rape trial, the way in which Zuma conducted himself after each day of the trial, singing a song which means "Bring me my machine gun," which is a song of war, liberation war, and he sings this in a time of peace. So it creates a climate which is legitimating of violent actions. Also, the people in the crowds around there use violent ways of threatening the complainant in the rape trial. And later, this violence was expressed with Vavi and Malema saying they were ready to kill for Zuma, and COPE was formed then, and COPE's meetings were broken up. There's been a whole lot of other acts of violence since then, but I believe that the tone set by a leader who sets himself up as a masculine warrior is important in understanding that violence.
And lastly, in your column, you give us hope that there may be an opportunity to rebuild our country by reflecting carefully on the legacies of the Zuma period. How is this possible?
Well, reflecting is not a way of... reflecting is necessary in order to remedy the problems that we've had, but it's not sufficient. We've got to understand what is it that we want to correct, and I don't intend to give hope through that alone. I think it's something you have to do. You have to ask yourself not simply whether we've got a new person who's much better, it seems, than Zuma, but what was wrong in the Zuma period. Because if we don't identify all the factors, like I've focused a lot on cultural factors, if you don't focus on these, on the violence, on all of these factors, then some of these things will live on. If you address all of these things, the totality of the problems of that period, that way you can rebuild democracy on foundations that do not bear the imprint of the Zuma period that we're trying to rid ourselves of.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Crema Media's Polity about unfinished business and legacies of the #Zuma period.